VHS 2 is the type of movie that looks at VHS 1 and goes, let's do that, but again. Being rushed straight into production as soon as it was clear the original was going to be a success, the second movie follows more or less the same basic formula that worked well the first time. You know, degenerates doing degenerate things, while having a big slumber party to watch some creepy old dead dudes videos. Except this time, instead of a criminal gang consisting of a bunch of hyped up 14-year-old kids smashing stuff, it's private investigators secretly filming people during their intimate moments, and then extorting them with said footage of their intimate moments.
If I don't hear from you by tomorrow, your wife gets that fine. Goodbye.
Yeah, still a criminal gang actually. The movie begins with someone filming a couple while simultaneously having an asthma attack by the sound of his breathing, as he peeks through their motel window and watches them perform acts that God would greatly disapprove of. He's not exactly great at the whole don't get caught perving on people thing, and is more or less immediately spotted before being chased down the street by a naked guy with his fleshy parts flapping about in the wind. Next on the agenda for the PI named Larry and girlfriend Aisha is that they're tasked with helping to locate a mother's missing son named Kyle. So being the law-abiding citizens that they are, they immediately break into his house and discover the living room full of TVs and an open laptop. Larry touches a drop of wet blood on the wall, because apparently he likes to collect blood-borne diseases, and Aisha finds a recording of Kyle on the laptop as he discusses finding a new tape, the latest addition to his collection of foot videos. Aisha puts the tape in and sets the camera down facing her as if she's getting ready to record the next episode of her YouTube reaction series, just instead of silly little internet videos, it's silly little people horrifically being unalived videos. And as she does, we see someone appear in the doorframe behind her as the first tape begins to play, because I guess this is their favourite one or something. The first tape is called Phase 1 Clinical Trials, directed by Adam Wingard. The tape begins with a man named Herman receiving an experimental eye implant free of charge after damaging his previous one in a car accident. The doctor tells him that there may be a few visual glitches at first due to it being experimental, and that they're going to need to record everything for the time being to allow them to collect data. Data that consists of whatever freaky things he's into, because I doubt this thing comes with an incognito mode. Well, he could always just keep one of his eyes closed. And the side effect of this being recorded through his literal eye socket is the constant blinking, because unfortunately, that's a thing people do. Stupid, inconsiderate people. If you thought shaky cam was annoying, now we've got blinky cam. After receiving every introvert's worst nightmare, and being awkwardly stared at by a woman in the lobby, he heads home and decides to pass some time with some video games. After getting up to make himself a drink, he returns to notice that his controller has now been moved, before suddenly, his kettle is flung on the floor behind him. Apparently this poltergeist is thirsty, and really doesn't want to be player 2. He then heads into his bedroom to discover what appears to be a person lying in his bed, and Herman reacts to the sight of this narcoleptic intruder by saying, hello?
Hello?
Nice one, Herman. He pulls back the blanket to reveal nothing, before turning around to reveal very much something, and by something, I mean a freaky looking zombie guy staring directly at him, who looks like he's about to bum a cigarette. He locks himself in the bathroom because he suffers from really bad anxiety poos, before it then cuts to him on the phone with the doctor as he questions his definition of a visual glitch, because that's a dude. He then leaves his bathroom to then be startled by a creepy child standing in his hallway, before she appears right in front of him to ask if he's got any games on his phone. He's straight back into the bathroom, because IBS is no joke, before hearing multiple knocks at the door. It then cuts to him waking up the next morning in the bathtub, because apparently he couldn't take a little 7-year-old girl on, and proceeds to immediately fall right back to sleep on the sofa for a post-nap nap. Hours later, he wakes up to find the same woman who was awkwardly staring at him in the hospital lobby, awkwardly staring at him through his gate. The woman's name is Clarissa, and she tells him that she was born deaf, but when she was 16, she was given an implant that allowed her to hear. Hear a little too well apparently, as shortly after receiving the implant, she began hearing the dead. And she tells him that she could hear a crying child as she came inside his house. Yeah, Herman didn't have any games on his phone. Clarissa tells Herman that the implants allow them to interact with what other people can't see, and the more that they do interact with the dead, the more they can be hurt by them, before Herman looks up to see a dude just chilling in his tighty whities. But that's no ghost though. That's just Greg. She tells him that the man that she can see is actually her uncle, and that she knows of a way to make them leave, before proceeding to immediately remove all of her clothes so Herman can give her an implant of his own, while her uncle watches. Bit weird that. After waking up from their demon expelling session, Herman once again finds someone lying in his bed. Ignoring Clarissa's advice to not interact with them, he proceeds to immediately interact with them and acts all surprised to find a creepy little dead girl in his bed. He then sees Clarissa get dragged outside and into the pool before they're both pulled into the water as he tries to save her. As they both frantically struggle to try and free themselves, eventually Clarissa succumbs to the water and drowns, while Herman just kinda climbs out of the pool to leave her there. Talk about pump and dump. Herman runs back into the house, and after almost being caught by a pair of ghosts in the hallway, he locks himself in the bathroom again. He picks up a razor and decides to force the implant out of his head with a little impromptu surgery. But the ghosts are absolutely appalled at the abhorrent health and safety violations of performing a surgery in the bathroom, so decide to grab him anyway and force the implant down his throat. The tape ends with the person in the doorframe gone, and Aisha shows Larry the footage of Kyle as he's talking about how the tapes can affect you, but lowers the volume just as he's about to go into detail, leaving them unable to hear important information that may have been able to save them. And while Larry continues to look around the house, he tells Aisha to carry on watching the tapes in hopes of her finding a limited edition Lion King video. He's always wanted that one. And the second tape, A Ride in the Park, directed by Eduardo Sanchez and Greg Hale, begins to play. The tape begins with a guy named Mike turning on his helmet and bike cams before getting a call from his girlfriend Amy, who complains that he rides his bike more than he rides her. Don't kink shame Amy, not cool. After his call, he begins riding through the woods, and I begin to almost immediately throw up from motion sickness because please for the love of God, can you get some stabilization on that camera, Mike? He's suddenly stopped dead in his tracks by a woman crying out for help, before the woman then proceeds to puke out a black substance as Mike begins to hear something in the trees. So in response, he picks up a big stick and begins to threaten the people over there. Because of course the responsible thing to do after spotting people in the woods is to threaten them with a large stick. As he returns to the woman, it appears that she's now turned into some kind of zombie-like creature and pounces onto him before biting into his neck. Mike manages to get away by upgrading his bashing stick to a bashing rock, and takes off running into the woods as the other camera captures his pursuers. He begins trudging his way through the woods, making a right mess of the place as he does, squirting his inside juices all over the place, until eventually falling to the floor and puking up the same black substance as the woman. Guinness. Mike's got a drinking problem. He falls down an embankment and seemingly dies from his injuries as we see a man and woman approach from the distance. They find Mike, looking like he's had one too many the night before, laying in a pool of blood and puke, and when they come closer to investigate, Mike swaps his Guinness drinking problem for a people drinking problem as he suddenly leaps up to give the man a big ol' sloppy kiss before taking the woman to the floor and biting her leg. Mike never did like legs. He turns around to see the man lying on the floor as he's begun to change, so Mike grabs his hand and helps himself to a nice finger sandwich. He begins digging into his, insides, and the woman returns to get a taste of her own, when suddenly the man sits up and looks directly at them as they're rudely eating his insides and not sharing any. They then stumble into a child's birthday party and gatecrash the event by digging into the main course themselves, the main course being people. Mike's then attacked by a man, not so keen on the prospect of watching his child get eaten, and after the man gets swarmed, Mike turns his attention to a father and his 3 little girls. He's gonna gobble them up like a chicken nugget 6-piece. Mike stops to admire himself in the reflection of a window, like the flesh-loving narcissist that he is, when someone comes up behind him and ruins his dashing good looks with a shotgun blast. And the shooter should really work on his situational awareness, as after firing at a few more zombies, he's taken to the floor by someone who's been slowly walking over to him and growling for like the past 30 seconds. Unless he's deaf, then well, unlucky buddy. Mike then gets run over by a car after failing to look both ways, and as he's staring at a woman crying, he pulls out his phone after butt dialing his girlfriend. After hearing her tell him she loves him, and not wanting a simp for a girlfriend, Mike crawls his way over to the boom boom stick, places it beneath his chin, and his head is sent flying into the stratosphere. After the tape ends, Larry walks back into the room to find Aisha sitting there in a trance, likely still feeling queasy from the bike scene that looked like it was filmed by someone with late-stage Parkinson's disease, so he startles her back into reality and notices that her nose is bleeding. She tells him that she also has a migraine, but forgot to bring her medication with her, and with Aisha not wanting to move, the lazy ass, Larry decides to leave his unwell girlfriend alone in a house that they've just broken into that's absolutely full to the brim with freaky tapes, and not the type that you keep under your bed. After Larry leaves, we see someone looking for their precious doing their best Smeagol impression as he just stays there, watching Aisha as the third tape plays. Safe Haven, directed by Timo Chianto and Gareth Evans. Someone will still tell me I pronounced that wrong. The third tape begins in Indonesia as we follow Malik, his girlfriend Lena, Adam and Joni as they're about to begin filming a documentary about the Paradise Gates cult. And if there's one thing that I know about cults, it's that they make for a really good documentary. It cuts to them interviewing a rather strong-boned man as they sit down with the leader of the cult known as Father, as he enjoys a nice refreshing glass of milk and tells them all about a higher plane of existence that he and his members are soon to reach. But for some odd reason, the only way to reach this higher plane of existence is to give this guy all of your money and let him be your wife. Huh. Weird that. Lena manages to convince the man to allow them into the commune by promising to tell the real story, before then cutting to various different CCTV cameras showing a man dragging 2 heavy bags definitely not containing children, a classroom full of children, and a room that looks like they designed it straight out of a How to Be a Demonic Cult guide. The film crew arrive outside of the commune and are greeted by a young girl and a woman known only as Madame. After handing Lena a necklace, the girl accidentally lets slip that she's not a child anymore, as their father took care of that, their father being the cult leader and resident kiddie diddler. After entering, Lena immediately discards of the necklace, because ooh gross, and they make their way deeper into the building, passing by various rooms filled with members, where they're then taken to meet with the father in his office. And just as they're about to start their interview, Lena suddenly gags at the thought of this weird little dude downing another glass of milk and leaves to find a restroom, shortly followed by Adam. Lena, with a hidden camera in her shirt, walks into the classroom to be completely ignored by the children, ignorant little things, before Madame walks in and tells her that her children will be far more beautiful than these, essentially telling a classroom full of kids that they're all ugly to their face. Indonesians are just built different. Back with Malik, Father tells him that people bring their wives and children to him so that he can wash away their impurities, which yes, I'm pretty sure means exactly what you think it does. Johnny, being the camera guy and having the one and only job to take care of the camera equipment, forgot to charge its battery, so Malik runs back to the car to get another one. And as he checks the trunk of the car, he can see a live feed of Adam's camera, where he overhears Lena say to Adam that she's pregnant and that he's the father. In other words, a really big yikes moment. Father tells Johnny that it's time and begins an announcement over the loudspeakers by saying that today we will reach our salvation, and Lena watches on as a classroom full of children are all handed cups to drink from as Adam stumbles across a room covered in blood after running off and having a tantrum because he learnt that these little things called his actions result in these little things called consequences. Oh no, poor me, I slept with my best friend's fiancé and now have to face reality. Adam pulls back the curtain to discover someone in an operating room covered in a sheet looking like they haven't had the greatest time. He pulls back the cover to reveal the woman's face, and she suddenly wakes up with her stomach split down the middle. And with the thought of being a father already a disturbing thought for Adam, he runs away from this woman too. Back with Father, he's now removing his clothes for some reason, presumably mistaking Johnny for one of his wives/children that he's so fond of. He jumps up onto the table wielding a knife, before pouncing onto Johnny like the topless, sweaty madman that he is, and driving it into his neck, before giving Johnny permanent easy access to his windpipe, just in case he ever needed it. Lena's snatched away by a group of creepy little girls doing their best to uphold their PPE regulations, and Adam opens the classroom to find everyone taking a permanent sleep with their drinks spilt. Talk about crying over spilt milk. Malik comes sprinting back into the building and finds a group of men standing in a room when all of a sudden they raise loaded weapons to their heads and pull the triggers. A man is seen trying to run away, but is shot down by someone else, before the man then fires at Malik. But Malik, bringing a trash can to a gunfight, manages to wrestle the man for the weapon before the man proceeds to aim it towards himself and pulls the trigger too. And before Malik even has time to comprehend what he's just witnessed, he's knocked to the ground and dragged away. Adam, sprinting through the building, trying his best to avoid the responsibilities of parenthood and the occasional bullet, turns the corner to see someone about to execute Malik. Adam attempts to stop the man, but the man turns anyway and pulls the trigger. Before we then see, from the perspective of Malik's camera, the man turns the weapon on himself. Hearing the screams of Lena and deciding that he may as well give this whole being a dad thing a shot, Adam finds Lena being dragged away by a group of hysterically laughing women and their dancing father wearing nothing but his undies. After arming himself with a pipe, in a building full of readily available much better weapons, like a trash can, he begins walking down the hallway. But right as he reaches the door, it suddenly explodes, and something looking like it'll need a good few cans of bug spray to deal with scurries its way across the ceiling. Father then begins walking his way down the hallway when suddenly he too explodes. What exactly do they put in Indonesian milk? After entering the room with Lena and brutally beating one woman with a pipe, because screw that one woman in particular I guess, he pulls the hands from the other women who are attempting to hold Lena down. Remind me to never arm wrestle Adam. Lena begins screaming to get it out of her, before pulling back her shirt to reveal a baby bump, and said baby wriggling around inside of her like it's a chest burster, before proceeding to do exactly that. Chest burst. A spike pierces its way out of her stomach, before a large horned creature begins climbing its way out of her insides, as if her uterus is the TARDIS or something. Small on the outside, big on the inside. Adam, having second thoughts about being the sole caregiver of this child, runs away and finds that Johnny has been turned into a zombie, and that all of the children have risen from the dead and are now singing nursery rhymes in class. Adam then sees Adam Jr., aka Big Boy Baphomet himself, and takes off running as it throws Johnny, seeing all manners of horrific things as he goes. After running directly into a group of zombies, he manages to make it through them and comes face to face with zombie Malik. And being the great friend that he is, not only does he impregnate Malik's fiancée, but he also smashes his head against the wall for good luck. He gets into the car and begins speeding away, as the sound of the creature can be heard roaring in the distance. That is, until it closes the distance, rams the car from the side, and sends it flying. And as Adam is crawling out the back of the car, the creature, now with sprouted wings, appears above him and calls him Papa. Ah, Daddy captured his first word on camera. Adam then begins maniacally laughing, with an equally maniacal booger hanging out of his nose, as the third tape comes to an end. Back at the house that's currently being broken into, and recorded by said housebreaker into us, Larry returns to find Aisha lying on the floor dead. Which, yeah, obviously. Not sure what you've really expected leaving your girlfriend alone in a creepy house full of supernatural tapes and Gollum impersonators. And as she's lying on the floor in a state of unalive, Larry decides that it'd be a good idea to watch a nice relaxing home video as he spots a tape with watch written on it. And then the fourth tape begins to play. Slumber Party Alien Abduction, directed by Jason Eisner. The tape begins with a camera attached to the family dog Tank as brothers Gary and Randy goof around creating home videos. Their parents are heading off for the night, leaving Gary, Randy and their sister Jen at home. Jen's boyfriend Zach quickly shows up and proceeds to be the generic boyfriend jock character by immediately doing generic boyfriend jock activities, so after the brothers' friends Sean and Danny arrive, they decide to play a nice friendly game of cover my sister and her friends with urine and unleash a barrage of urine-filled water guns and water balloons at them. And as Zach jumps into the water after them, for a split second you can see something behind him. After nobody seems to notice it, later that night, as Jen and Zach are using each other's tongues to check for tonsil stones, the boys charge into her room, blasting music and flashing a strobe light. So to get revenge on them, later that night, Jen and Zach attach the camera to Tank again and send the dog into the room where the boys are sleeping, all but one, as he's far too preoccupied polishing his sword. As he's confronted by a laughing Jen and Zach, suddenly a loud noise erupts, a bright, disorienting light shines through the window, and the power goes out. They see what appears to be the silhouettes of people standing outside of the door, and after Zach heads off to investigate, something pounces out of the shadows and takes him. Then without warning, a group of alien creatures swarm the room to capture the sword polisher and the rest of the kids. Or maybe they just think they stink and really need to bathe, as for some reason the group then find themselves wrapped in what appears to be blankets and dropped into the lake. Tank and Gary are pulled from the lake by Randy and Jen, and as they perform CPR on him, something emerges from the other end of the dock and begins crawling towards them, but they just manage to resuscitate him in time and take off running into the woods. They hide amongst the trees like a group of hobbits avoiding a Nazgul, but Tank's bark alerts the aliens right as the police begin to arrive. So the kids take off running towards the flashing lights and sirens, but without warning, the aliens activate the cheat code to lose their 5-star wanted level, and the noise suddenly stops, and the police are nowhere to be seen. Randy is suddenly grabbed by the aliens, and good boy Tank is sent flying after trying to protect his friend. Gary and Jen then hide in a barn, but as the aliens begin making their way in, Gary is able to climb a ladder with Tank, but Jen is then grabbed by one of the aliens and puked on for some reason. No, that's just weird. Seconds before Gary is about to be grabbed, the ceiling breaks away and he's lifted into the air, before dropping Tank as he and the camera plummet towards the ground. Because apparently these aliens are in the business of drowning children and dropping dogs from really high places. Back in the house, not even a fun alien abduction movie could make Larry feel better, as he sits there all sad looking and crying as if a loved one has just died or something. Oh wait, he hits play on the laptop, and Kyle says that it's now time for him to make a tape, but not the type of tape you buy from the site that sounds awfully similar to Bonely Bands, and the bottom of his jaw off. But apparently it is but a scratch, as he sits back up with his entire jaw missing, leaving behind what could only be described as rancid deli meat, before getting up and walking it off. And moments later on the video, we then see Larry and Daisha entering the house, only moments after Kyle had pulled the trigger, leaving me to wonder if they've got hearing difficulties or something, so they didn't hear the incredibly loud bang noise that they were only a few meters away from. Okay. Rigor mortis kicks in hard, as Aisha suddenly sits up and pounces onto Larry. In the struggle, he manages to break her neck, but with her body contorted and broken, she keeps on coming. He channels his inner child and hides in the bedroom closet, and watches as she scurries past the door, before aiming at the doorway and f***ing as soon as she appears again. But before Larry can enjoy his newfound singleness, from both his girlfriend and the freaky demon chick, he turns his torch on to see Kyle sitting there. So Kyle reaches out, trying to give him a big sloppy kiss with nothing but tongue, and the movie comes to an end with Kyle killing Larry and giving a thumbs up to the camera. Before we finish up, I just want to let you guys know that I've now launched the YouTube membership program for the channel, so if you were potentially interested in something like that, you could sign up for some cool perks like access to uncensored videos and the exclusive Discord server. So a big thank you to Grumpy Old Man for being the first channel member, and also another big thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Thanks to Dom, Hunters263, Rebecca Pitts, A Dandy in Space, Martin Brannan, Natasha Twyman, Jared CBs, Pascal Mathis, Richard McGowan III, Macy J, Chris, Dennis, Wade Knott, Ashley L. Wintz, Christopher Butsky, Joshua Torres, Remy, Fire Goes Fast, Josh Brooks, Dyreme, Robert Zerweck, Dark Shiva, Josh Hannon, Billy Whitaker, Lonif, Jay Slows, Daniel Dickinson, Donnie Duwork, G-Source, and Fatty Ghost. So a big thank you to all of the channel members and Patreon supporters, and thank you to everyone else for watching.